Hello and welcome back. We are in Chapter 6%, and today we're discussing Lesson 2, Estimating with Percents. To estimate the percent of a number, choose a fraction. One way to do it is to choose a fraction that is close to the given percent. So these are different percentages, and these are fractions that are equivalent to those percentages. So this is a really good thing to memorize. It will help you out if you can memorize this table. So if we look, 5% is the same thing as 1/20th, 10% is the same thing as 1/10, 20% is the same thing as 1/5, 25% is the same thing as 1/4, 33 1/3% is the same thing as 1/3, 40% is the same thing as 2/5, 50% is the same thing as 1/2, 60% is the same thing as 3/5, 75% is the same thing as 3/4, and 80% is the same thing as 4/5. Your life is going to be easier in the world of mathematics if you memorize all of these. I would say the ones that are just you have to memorize, 10% being 1/10, you have to memorize that one. 20% being 1/5 is very nice to memorize. This one right here, 25% equaling 1/4, that's a must. 33 1/3% equaling 1/3, a must. 50% equaling 1/2, that is a must. 75% equaling 3/4 is a must. Yeah. The kind of cool thing about these is if you can remember 1/5 equaling 20%, if you have 2/5, then you just double it, right? So then it's 40%. Or if you have 3/5, you multiply the original 1/5, 20% times 3, and you get the 60%. Or if it's 4/5, you multiply the original, because we go back to 1/5, and you multiply that original one by 4, and you get 80%. So really, if you can memorize this one right here, this one is related to this one, and this one. Okay, so if it's 2/5, you multiply 20 times 2 and you get 40%. If it's 3/5, you multiply 20% times 3 and you get 60%. If it's 4/5, you multiply that 20% by 4 and you get 80%. So if you can memorize this one, you can use this one and multiplication to really figure out the other ones pretty easily. 5% is 1/20th as well. That's a good one. But these ones are the priority memorize. But if you want to make life easier, memorize them all. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at an example of how this is applied. Here we're going to estimate 27% of 123. Now, when we look at 27%, what I'm going to say is 27% is about 25%. Now, if we go up to our table, 25% is equivalent to 1/4. Okay, so we're estimating here. So 27% is about 25%. 25% is the same thing as 1/4. Okay. Now, 123 rounded to the nearest 10 is 120. So for an easy estimate, we can take 1/4 and multiply it by 120. And if we do that math, I'm going to do that off to the side. 1/4 times 120. We're just multiplying fractions, right? I'm going to make it 120 over 1. And I'm going to look to cross cancel. Is there a common factor between 4 and 120? Well, yeah, I know 2 goes into both of them. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 goes into 160 60 times. And then is there a common factor between 2 and 60? Yeah, 2 goes into 2 1 time. 2 goes into 60 30 times. Then I multiply across. 1 times 30 is 30. 1 times 1 is 1, and I get 30. So 27%, which is the answer here, 1/4 times 120 is equal to 30. So what we can say is 27% of 123 is about 30. Okay, so now we're going to do a couple of different problems kind of like this. Let's focus on problems 1 and 2. Problem 1 states that 17% of 40, we're going to try to estimate, so use a fraction to estimate the percent of each number. So 17% of 49. What I'm going to say is 17% is about 20. Okay, and if we look back up at our table, it's about 20%. I should have wrote 20%. 20%, if we memorize that, is the same thing as 1/5. Okay? And then we move down here. 49 rounded to the nearest 10 would be 50. So really, we just need to take these two numbers and multiply them for a pretty good estimate. So 1/5 times 50, I'm going to make it 50 over 1. We're going to look to cross cancel. We know that 5 goes into 5 and it also goes into 50. So 5 goes into 5 one time and 5 goes into 50 10 times. And then we just multiply across. 1 times 10 is 10 over 1 times 1 is 1, which is 10. Okay, so what that means is, so 17% of 49 is about 10. That's a pretty good estimate. All right. Okay, let's go on to problem 2. It says 58% of 298. Well, 58% is about the same thing as 60%, which is, if we go up to our table, 60% is the same thing as 3/5. Okay, and then it says 298 rounded to the nearest 10 would be 300. So if we just take these two, this fraction and this number, and we multiply them by each other, we can find out a pretty good estimate. I'm going to make it 300 over 1. We're going to look to cross cancel first. What I know is I know that 5 goes into 300. I just don't know how many times. So I'm going to go over here to the side and go 300 divided by 5. 5 doesn't go into 3, but it does go into 30. 5 goes into 36 times. 6 times 5 is 30. There's no remainder. We drop down that 0. 5 doesn't go into 0. So 0 times 5 is 0. No remainder. We're done. So that means that 5 goes into 300 60 times. And 5 goes into itself 1 time. We multiply across. So now we're going 3 times 60. When there's this 0 there, we can just go 3 times 6 is 18 and then add the 0, so we know it's 180. 1 times 1 is just 1. So we end up with 180 as our answer. So that means that 58% of 298 is about 180. Okay, let's go ahead and try problems 3 and 4. I think I'm going to zoom out to be able to get that table in the picture as well. Okay, so 4% of 42. Well, 4% is about the same as 5%, which is, 5% is the same thing as 1/20. Okay, and then 42 rounded to the nearest 10 would be 40. So if we multiply these two, we can find a pretty good estimate. 1/20 times 40. I'm going to make it 40 over 1. And then I'm just going to try to, I'm multiplying fractions, so I'm going to look to cross cancel first. Is there a common factor between 20 and 40? Yeah, 20. 20 goes into 20 one time, and 20 goes into 40 two times. Then I multiply across. I get 1 times 2, which is 2. 1 times 1, which is 1. So the answer is 2. So 4% of 42 is about 2. So that's a pretty good estimate. So I want you to go ahead and try to work out problem number 4 on your own. So go ahead and pause, work out problem 4, and when you get done, press play and we'll see how you did. All right, we're back with problem 4. Let's see how you did. 46% is about the same thing as 50%, which if we look up here, 50% is the same thing as 1/2. 533 rounded to the nearest 10 would be 530. So we're just going to multiply these two. So we have 1/2 times 530. I'm going to make it over 1. We're multiplying fractions, so we look to cross cancel. I know that 2 goes into both of these numbers because they're both even, but I don't know how many times 2 goes into 530, so I'm going to do some long division over here on the side. 530 divided by 2 to figure out how many times 2 goes into 530. 2 goes into 5 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. 5 take away 4 is 1. I drop that 3 down like it's hot. 2 goes into 13 6 times. 6 times 2 is 12. I subtract and I have 1, and then I have to drop down this 0. And then 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. We have no remainder, so there you go. 2 goes into 530 265 times. And then 2 goes into 2 one time. Then we multiply across. 1 times 265 is 265. 1 times 1 is 1. I end up with 265 as my answer. So what that means is 46% of 533 is about 265. So if you got that one right, great job. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the back page. Now with this back page, I'm going to go ahead and leave this table on the top part so we can refer to it. We're going to do the first one together because on this one, I want us to kind of move a step further. We're going to use a fraction to estimate the percent of each number, but then we're just going to go ahead and find the percent of each number, okay? So let's go ahead and find the estimate first. So we're looking at 11. So we're going to, each of these problems, it's going to have two steps, okay? So let's do the estimate first. 11% is close to 10%, which is the same thing as 1/10. So we have 1/10. And of means times, okay? 88 is, if we run it to the nearest 10, it would be close to 90. And we're going to make it a fraction, so 90 over 1, okay? We're going to look to cross cancel. So is there a common factor between 10 and 90? Yes, it's 10. 10 goes into 10 one time. 10 goes into 99 times, and then we multiply across. So we have 1 times 9, which is 9. 1 times 1, which is 1. So we end up with 9 as our estimate. So this is our estimate. Now we're going to find the actual value. Okay, so whenever you're finding the actual value, you need to change this of 11% of 88. You need to change this percent into a decimal. So we're going to move it 2 places to the left, and we get 0.11. The word of means times, and then we're just going to keep it 88. So we're just going to do this multiplication of a decimal. So we're going to go 88 times 0.11. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 8 is 8. I'm in the tens place, so I have to add a 0 in the ones place. Then I can start. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 8 is 8. I add. 8 plus 0 is 8. 8 plus 8 is 16. Write the 6, carry the 1. 1 plus 8 is 9. And then since I'm multiplying decimals, I have to count up the number of decimal places. So there's 2 decimal places, which means my answer has to have 2 decimal places. And so that's where my decimal goes. So the actual percent of this number is equal to 9.68, which is pretty close to our estimate right there. Okay? So for these problems, I want to find the estimate and the actual. So we're going to do problem 6 one more time together, and then I'm going to have you do 7 and 8 on your own. So first, we're going to find the estimate. Okay, so 75% is 74%, I'm sorry. 74% is really close to 75%. 75% is the same thing as 3/4. 3/4 of means times. 203 rounded to the nearest 10 is going to be 200. We're going to make it a fraction, 2 over 1. So we're trying to find the estimate of 74% of 203. We're multiplying fractions, so we're going to look to cross cancel. Right off the bat, I don't know how many times 4 goes into 200, but I do know how many times 2 goes in. So I know that 2 goes into 4, 2 times, and I know that 2 goes into a 200 100 times. And then I know that 2 goes into both of these. So 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 150 times. Okay, so now I'm going to multiply across. So 3 times 50. Since 50 has a 0, what I can do is go 3 times 5, which is 15, and then add the 0. So that's equal to 150. And then 1 times 1 is 1, so my answer is 150. So the estimate of 74% of 203 is 150. Now let's go ahead and find the actual value and see how close it is. Okay, so 74% of 203. First thing I need to do is change this to a decimal. So I'm going to move it 2 places, the decimal point 2 places to the left, which I end up with 0.74 of means times 203. Okay, I need to multiply these. Now this has 1, 2, 3 places. This has 2. So I'm going to put the number with the most places on top. So it's going to be 203 times 0.74. And then I just multiply. 4 times 3 is 12. I write the 2 and carry the 1. 4 times 0 is 0, plus the 1 is 1. 4 times 2 is 8. I'm in the tens place, so I need to put a 0 in the ones place, then I can start. 7 times 3 is 21. I write the 1 and carry the 2. 7 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. 7 times 2 is 14. And now it is time to add. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus 1 is 2. 8 plus 2 is 10. Write the 0, carry the 1. 4 plus 1 is 5, and then drop the 1. Since I'm multiplying decimals, I need to count the amount of decimal places here. There's 1, 2, so that means my answer needs to have 1, 2. So this is where I put the decimal right there. And so my answer ends up being, of the actual, is 150.22, which is actually really super close to our estimate right there. So it looks like our estimate worked pretty well. So now on problems 7 and 8, I want you to go ahead and do those on your own. I want you to do the estimate first, and then the actual for both of these, okay? So here's our friend the pause dragon, reminding you that you need to pause your device. Go ahead and work out problems 7 and 8, and when you get done, press play and we'll talk about them. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. All right, we are back. Let's go ahead and figure out problem number 7, 21% of 346. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to estimate. Okay, 21% is really close to 20%, which is the same thing as 1/5 of means times. 346 is this, really, if we round that to the nearest tenth, is going to be really close to 350. I'm going to make it 350 over 1, so we are just multiplying fractions. We're going to look to cross cancel. I know that 5 goes into both of these. I don't know how many times off the top of my head 5 goes into 350, so I'm just going to do some long division over here. 350 divided by 5. 5 doesn't go into 3, but 5 goes into 35 7 times. 7 times 5 is 35. Then I take away 35, take away 35 is 0. And then I drop this 0 like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. Okay. 5 does not go into 0. And so 0 times 5 is 0. No remainder. Boom. We're done. So that means that 5 goes into 350 70 times. And 5 goes into itself 1 time. Then we just multiply across. 1 times 70 is 70. 1 times 1 is 1. So our answer for our estimate of 21% of 346 is equal to 70. Now let's go ahead and find the actual value and see how close we are. So when we are doing the actual value is going to be 21% of 346. 21%, we're going to change that to a decimal, means we're going to move it over 2 places to the left. So we end up with 0.21 of means times 346. We're just going to go ahead and multiply 0.21 just has 2 places. 346 has 1, 2, 3. So that means I'm going to put 346 on top. So 346 times 0.21. Then I just do the multiplication. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 3 is 3. That was pretty easy. I'm in the tens place, so I need to put a 0 in the ones place before I can get started. 2 times 6 is 12. I write the 2. I carry the 1. 2 times 4 is 8. Plus 1 is 9. 2 times 3 is 6. I'm sorry. That's 12. Carry the 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. Okay. So then we add. 6 plus 0 is 6. 4 plus 2 is 6. 3 plus 9 is 12. Write the 2, carry the 1. 1 plus 6 is 7. Since we're multiplying decimals, we need to count up the decimal places. There is 1 and 2. Means our answer has to have 2 decimal places as well. So the decimal goes right here. And so the answer of the actual is 72.66. Okay? And that's pretty close to our estimate. It's not as close as the others, but it's still in the same ballpark. So we did pretty good. Okay? Let's go ahead and check and see how you did on problem 8. So the first thing we're going to do is do the estimate. So if you're looking at 79%, 79% is really close to 80%, which is the same thing as 4/5. So we're going to go 4/5 of means times 55 to the nearest tenth. I would love to just use 55. I mean, we could round it, but I'm just going to use 55. Why not? Maybe you rounded it. You probably rounded it up to 60, huh? So I guess I'll just do that, even though doing it as 55 would be really close. Okay, so we're going to round it to the nearest 10, which would be 60. Okay, make it a fraction. We look to cross cancel, and we notice that the common factor between 5 and 60 is 5. 5 goes into 5 one time. 5 goes into 60 12 times. And then we just multiply across. 4 times 12 is 48. If you don't know that, you just do the multiplication. 1 times 1 is, I know it because of feet. 12 is like 12 inches. And whenever you have 4 feet, it's the same thing as 48 inches. So that's why I'm able to memorize that one. 1 times 1 is 1. And so our answer is 48. That's the estimate. I'm going to go ahead and do a second estimate because I really want to do it with the 55. So 79% is the same thing as 80%, which is the same thing as 4/5, right? And I know I rounded this to 60, but it's actually going to be more accurate if I leave it as 55. So the answer you should have been 48, but I know that 5 goes into 55, so this is going to be really, really easy, and my estimate's going to be more accurate. So 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 55 11 times, and then 4 times 11 is going to be 44 over 1, which is just the same thing as 44. So this is the estimate value that you should have had if you were rounding this to the nearest 10. However, it just so happens that 55 and 5, they have a common factor, so that's pretty easy to work with as well. And this one is actually going to be more accurate. And we'll see when we do the, and we're just doing estimating anyways, but yeah, so if you did this and you round to the nearest 10, you should have got a 48. But this is just a kind of like it's not like a usual example, it just kind of works out, and I know that this one's going to be more accurate. So let's go ahead and figure out what the actual is. I know this still isn't going to be right, perfectly right, but I know that's going to be closer than that one. So let's figure out what the actual value is. We're going to go 79% of 55. Okay, so 79%, we got to change that to a decimal. We're going to move it 2 places to the left. So now we have 0.79 of is times 55. Here there's 2 places, here there's 2 places. It doesn't matter which one you put on the top and the bottom. I'm actually going to put 55 on the bottom because I like multiplying by 5 more than I like multiplying by 7 and 9. So I'm going to put this as 0 points, well, just, I don't need the 0, 0.79 times 55. And if you see, now I'm multiplying everything by 5, and I don't know, I just like multiplying by 5 better. I mean, I can do both, but whatever, it's what I like. So here we go. 5 times 9 is 45. Write the 5, carry the 4. 5 times 7, and I just want to say there's 2 decimal places. This has 1, not decimal places, this has 2 place values. 1, 2, this has 2 place values. So since they both have 2, it doesn't matter which one goes on top and which one goes on the bottom, okay? But if you had something where it was like 551, then we'd have 3 decimal places, and then 551 would need to go on top when you're multiplying. Okay, so I just want to clarify that. Okay, so 5 times 9 is 45. Write the 5, carry the 4. 5 times 7 is 35 plus 4. 35 plus 4. 35 plus 4 is 39. So I'm going to write 9 and the 3. Now I'm to the tens place, so I need to write a 0 in the ones. I have 5 times 9 again, which is 45. Write the 5, carry that 4, still works. 5 times 7 is 35 plus 4 is 39. Then I just add 5 plus 0 is 5. 9 plus 5 is 14. Carry the 1. On this one, I'm just going to go 9 plus 1, which is 10 plus 3 is 13. And then 3 plus 1 is 4. I'm multiplying decimals, so there's 2 decimal places there. It means my answer needs to have 2 decimal places. So that's where I'm going to put my decimal. And the actual answer, 43.45. 43.45. So like I said, it's super close to this estimate, which is more accurate, but it's also in the same ballpark as 48. So you should have got 48 and 43.45. If you did that, great job, and we'll see you next time.